So, I wanted to talk about a recent writing dilemma that I had. I was reading a craft book called The Emotional Craft of Fiction: How to Write the Story Beneath the Surface, which is by Donald Mass. I assume it's Mass, but it could be Moss. Um, and he was kind of talking about traditionally what we call showing versus telling, which personally I hate those terms, they make me cringe. He was calling it outer mode versus inner mode versus other mode, which is an interesting way of looking at it. But I was really struck by how he talked about showing versus telling because it did not align with my perspective of what those things are. There was like this one passage that he included where I felt like it was telling, but he was saying that it was showing. And it felt to me like he was saying that telling is kind of like defined by either an exaggerated voice or the lack of otherwise elevated style. Like you had to be almost doing stream of consciousness writing in order for it to be telling with anything, you know, to write home about. Like you have to be Holden Caulfield, or else you have to be saying like, I was sad, I wanted X, I missed Y. All of these like very boring things that I don't think we should limit telling. They were also saying, something that defines showing is like subtext. And I feel like subtext can be present in telling as well. It was all just very confusing and frustrating because I kept reading examples of what they said were showing and feeling like they were telling. They were just dynamic examples of telling. Because I understand saying that, like, a lot of the time when you punch up your diction, for example, that's an example of showing. Like, you switch out one verb for a more effective verb. Usually that's showing. I understand that. I wanted to bring up an example in K-pop of what I feel like is really effective telling that I think A, has subtext, and B, has style. I wanted to talk about how I think that telling can be done in an interesting way. You don't have to forego style, and like telling has its own purpose. It's about so much more than pacing. I feel like for me as a writer, I don't think that unless you have like a big pacing problem, I don't think that pacing is what you should have at the forefront of your mind when you're writing. I feel like that's something you maybe focus on in like a later draft. I tend to like things that have slower pacing. Like it can be a problem, but I can look past it. So maybe it's just a me thing, but I was so frustrated by all of this discussion of telling that I felt like was so limiting. And I wanted to talk, like I was saying, about an example in K-pop that I think is really effective, which is Wish You Hell by Wendy. Took me long enough to get around to the K-pop aspect. I think that Wish You Hell is a very understated song. Like, it's very, it's weird to call it cute. It's like, it's kind of goofy, as a concept. It's very tongue-in-cheek, I guess you could say. And I feel like a lot of these stylistic decisions are things that you might brush past without really thinking about them. You might just be like, oh, that's a tongue-in-cheek way of going about things. But there is an effect that is created by things like, for example, a lot of the lines do not have a grammatical subject. And not having a grammatical subject in a song that is largely about losing yourself and finding yourself feels very significant. It's significant when they do introduce the I. It's purposeful. I don't like the term purposeful pop. I'm not going to say purposeful pop, but it's purposeful. When they talk about the previous them being trapped inside this doll, they're utilizing a really effective symbol because a doll is kind of similar to, I know this is going to sound weird, but a disembodied hand, in that a disembodied hand is like a really classic symbol of the uncanny because it's something very familiar made unfamiliar. And a doll is something that, we associate largely with childhood, with playing. And it's something that in a lot of media has been made into something very scary. So it's something that the perception of it has totally flipped, and it creates this really weird feeling in us that is almost more scary than like things that are traditionally scary. We also have just the idea of wishing you hell. I don't wish you well. Like, yes, this is very direct. It is, saying exactly what you wish for and what you don't wish for. But at the same time, there is the subtext of like, there's something that went on here. And like, we don't know exactly what it is, but we get the feeling that there was something, I don't want to say traumatic necessarily, something dramatic to get us to the point where it's like, I wish you hell. And also, there's reveling in hell, but there's also the idea of like, do you hate yourself? Do you hate your old self and now you're reveling in hell? And what does that mean for you, like, at all times? Like, there is a character arc that is being portrayed here that we don't really have. We're not really privy to exactly how things went down, but there is a character arc to be seen here. And that's not something you necessarily see in a lot of K-pop songs. Sometimes you do, but this is like a very specific example that I think is very effective. I think the bitter pill is also an interesting symbol here because traditionally pills are supposed to help you. They're supposed to heal you. Of course, there are lots of things that can go wrong with pills. You can have side effects. You can take too many. But traditionally, they're supposed to help you. So turning them into something darker is kind of uncanny. Also, there's the fact that most pills are bitter. You're not supposed to taste them. So this could just be any regular pill, or it could be emphasizing the extent of their bitterness, which I think is the point. But it is interesting to think like, yeah, it's a pill. It's going to be bitter. And maybe this is just like an inevitable way that they are changing their life. Like maybe this was always going to happen. Maybe there was nothing else that could happen. I also really like the way that the pre-chorus is worded because it feels very syntactical. It feels highly structured when they say, I am in fact unpredictable, a problem child. In the same way that they are tongue-in-cheek about hell, they are very technical and structured about chaos, which I think is interesting. I also really like that they say a bit broken and a little wary. It just feels like they're adding on these minimizing adjectives, managing to build up their point in a way that is still supposedly minimizing. Overall, I think this song very much takes the approach of telling is the best way to go about what they're attempting, but they're doing it in an interesting way. Telling does not have to be boring. It doesn't have to be just a matter of pacing. It can be so much more than, just like part of a stream of conscious narrative. There are many ways to implement it. It is versatile. I think that limiting an aspect of writing is such a sad thing to see in like educational material. I feel like we should be really promoting creativity. Like it is the most creative thing you can do, to take a specific element of writing and go about it in a way that we haven't seen before, or that is largely unique. Because we've seen everything before, but we also haven't seen everything before. It's literature. It's everything and nothing at the same time. That's how I feel. That is like the core of my being. So if you have any interesting thoughts about that, let me know. What do you think is telling versus showing? Are you a writer? Is your, like, can you read this book and tell me that I'm not crazy? This is a weird video, but it was one I had to make. I was like, I just rushed to make a Milanote board as soon as I thought of the idea. I was like, I need to talk about this. I need to talk about this. I need to talk about this. So I'm talking about it. Anyway, hope you're having a good day. Hope you had a good day. I don't know what time it is where you are. If you have any ideas for other topics you would like me to cover, writing topics preferably, I would be delighted to talk about any aspect of writing. That's writing and K-pop. That's all I want to talk about. So, hope you're having a good day. I really need to find a way to end these videos. Bye.